spirit fly into the mistake. And where that foghorn blows, I will be coming home. And when the foghorn blows, I wanna hear it. I don't have to fear it, and I wanna rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. And magnificently we will fold into the mistake. When that foghorn blows, you know I will be coming home. And when that foghorn whistle blows, I gotta hear it. I don't have to fear it, and I wanna rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. And together we will fold into the mistake. Come on, girl. so much. I can't stand it. Seems like my heart is breaking in two. The head says no, but my soul demands it. Everything I do reminds me of you. I miss it so much in this house full of shadows, while the rain keeps pouring down my window too. When will the pain recede to the darkness from whence it has come? And I'm feeling so blue. Ain't going down no more to the well. Sometimes it feels like I'm going to hell. Sometimes I'm knocking on your front door, but I don't have nothing to sell no more. Seems like the spirit is pushing me onwards. Don't ever the sea where I tripped and went wrong. Just have to guess where my soul will find comfort. But I miss you so much when I'm singing my song. Ain't going down no more to the well. In fact, sometimes it seems I'm going to hell. You'll find me knocking on your front door, but I don't have nothing to sell no more. Feels like my spirit is pushing me onward, though I'm able to see where I tripped when I went home. Just have to guess where my soul won't get comfort. I miss you so much when I'm singing my song. I miss you so much I can't stand it. Seems like my heart is breaking in two. The head says go, but my soul demands it. And everything I do reminds me of you. Everything I do reminds me of you. Everything I do reminds me of you.
Service of remembrance and celebration of the life of Neal Stevens. I am the Reverend Ali K.C. Bell, one of the ministers that serves this congregation. If you are joining us online, you can write in the chat and let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. Thank you for being here today. As we prepare to turn our hearts to the service of remembrance, I'm going to have, there we go. Technical difficulties. Now it wants to see my face. Here we go. Alrighty, I apologize for that. As we prepare to turn our hearts to memorializing Neal, the words of the poet Khalil Gibran ring true. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. While death has brought us together, life has gathered us too. As is the custom of our faith tradition, we open this sacred time with the lighting of the chalice. Today, this flame is in memory and hope that we carry within us as we honor Mr. Neal Stevens. We acknowledge that a human life is sacred in its beginning and in its ending. The flame we light is an ancient symbol of transformation, and the chalice that holds it is a symbol of community and service. As Neal's aunt, Jeannie Stevens, and friend Chris Bow light the chalice, please rise in body and or spirit and join us in sharing the chalice lighting words. We light this chalice in loving memory of our beloved friend and spiritual companion, Neal, and in tribute to the love a single life can inspire. May the chalice remind us of the extravagant gift of life. May it signify the community we create in our being together and our sharing together. You may be seated. We will now hear a reflection from Neal's sister, Hillary Stevens. Oh, you gotta sing first? Okay, we're gonna let him sing, I guess. And then Hillary, you're next.
No one's gonna want to hear me after. This song was written by Noel Paul-Stuckey, the Paul of the Peter, Paul, and Mary. The way to my father's house when I was just a boy lay through fields of innocence near bubbling springs of joy. And when I'd lay me down to sleep, I'd pray the Lord my soul to keep. The road was never very steep on my way to my father's house. The way to my father's house when I turned 17 wandered through inviting hills beside a tumbling stream. Sometimes in prayer upon my knees, I would feel a distant breeze. The road was winding now through trees on my way to my father's house. The way to my father's house at the age of 29 led over a mountain that I would seldom climb, except in times of great despair when I'd be looking everywhere. And then one morning he was there on the way to my Father's house. Glory, what a refreshing story. I was so blind before he opened my eyes, restoring me to the way to my Father's house at the age of 31 was a ride on the rainbow. My new life had begun, and every evening I could look through the pages of his book and recognize the paths I took on the way, I go to my Father's house in these troubled days. The Spirit is moving in mysterious ways. Reminded when old doubts appear that perfect love casts out all fear. In thanks, I tend the garden here. On the way, on the way to my Father's house.
And now we will hear a reflection from Neal's sister, Hillary Stevens.
I used to say that I had won the brother lottery for having blessed with someone so thoughtful and funny and intelligent as my oldest companion. We didn't always get along as little kids, but he took his role as big brother very seriously. He taught me how to hit a baseball and how to play chess, and he could make me laugh like no one else. We used to love to play card games, hours and hours of card games on family trips, in platform tents and on sailboats and in random motel rooms. We almost missed a flight one time because our family got so engrossed in a game of bridge at the airport that we missed the boarding announcement. I had to grab the cards and run. We rediscovered each other in our 20s. He came to my 25th birthday party and just charmed the hell out of everyone. And it's like we suddenly realized that the 3-year age difference really didn't mean anything anymore. And we started going on grand adventures together. We took each other to friends' parties, we went out on the sailboat with Dad, and we went on scuba diving trips. We went to the Bahamas, we went to Palau, we went to Australia. I've been fortunate enough in my life to have been scuba diving in some really amazing places, and professionally with researchers from great institutions. And let me tell you, none of them were half the dive buddy that Neal was. I never felt so safe, so watched over as I was with him. The awe, the wonder, the joy that he took in diving, but also the calm, the self-control that it takes to dive well, the technical mastery. It was such an example of all of the things that were important to him. But let me tell you, he never left that sense of humor behind. His antics, he could send me into giggle fits 80 feet underwater in full gear. Stop and think about that for a minute, with a mask and a regulator. Those were wonderful years. But years go by, life gets busy, apartments and jobs and relationships and so many things come and go. And he was always just a fixture in my life through all of it. When things got tough, we would call each other. He was always somebody that I could trust and rely on. And there's a big hole now. But my hope is that his memory will be a guidepost and an inspiration, because he was just a gold standard of how to live well. I can't thank you all enough for being here today and for everything you've done over the last few months. So many times. So many times I have heard from loved ones with support and memories, and that is such a testament to Neal. It is a testament to the company he kept and what he meant to all of us, and we are all better people for the time that we spent with him. So thank you again for being here today. I'll pass the mic to our cousin, Tommy Wiles.
Thank you, Hillary. Hello, everyone. Hillary was a little off there. Just to be precise, Neal Stevens was my first cousin, once removed, which is a technical way of saying that he was my cousin's son. He was of the next generation, although only 11 years separated us. But it was going to be hard to get to know Neal, not only because of those 11 years, but on that side of our family, there were upwards of 50 cousins and first cousins. There was an entire menagerie of characters on that side of the family. There was a lot going on, and it was much fun as a child growing up. And my parents, particularly my mother and her sisters, emphasized the importance of family. So we were getting together as much as possible. Not as much as we would have liked with the Stevens clan, but when they came, when they could, and it was always very exciting. And I mostly remember the times at the beach. And while most of us were down sleeping on the beach, laying the foundation for years of dermatology work, Neal and his younger sister Hillary would be back at the house with their dad, and they'd be playing chess. They'd be solving a Rubik's Cube, other brain teasers. They kept a safe distance from the rest of the more rambunctious family. But it was all good, and Neal was such a cute kid. He had a great smile, not only on his face, but in his eyes. And we knew good things would come for him. And as chance would have it, our paths would cross again some 2 decades later. Our careers took us both to New York City. Mine was more by happenstance. Neal's, it was really part of the plan. He had quite an educational pedigree. He had a law degree, another advanced degree that I don't understand what it is. He had interest in international business. He had interest in Asian studies. Neal was thinking globally before it became a buzzword. So he was really at home in New York City, a real New Yorker. I was more part of the New Jersey bridge and tunnel crowd. But when he did transition from law to the capital markets, which was my industry, we really had something in common, and we could get together and share war stories. If you didn't know him and you walked past him on the street in Soho, you wouldn't be too far off to think that he was an Abercrombie model with his chiseled jaw and dark good looks, slender figure. You know, we would consider him just some type of superficial, self-absorbed model. But Neal was actually the complete opposite of superficial. He was very complex. He was very deep. He had many, many interests. And I really benefited from having him there with me in New York. But the time went by fast with family and career. It almost was comparable to two subway trains passing each other on the tracks. It seems to be a blur now. And so again, I kind of went away from Neal without making a particularly deep connection. And I was the worse for it. But as chance would have it, our paths would cross once again. Some 10 or 15 years later, I had left New York and retired to the city of Austin. And within the first year, Neal contacted me and said, I'm down there on a business trip and would like to check in with you. And I thought that was awesome, that he would think of me. And we had a wonderful evening together. And another year or two goes by, and my sister Peggy says to me, you know, Neal's in town. I said, oh, again? I remember when he visited before. That's great. And she said, no, he's not in town. He's living here. He's moved into South Austin. And it was kind of typical Neal. I said, Neal, you come to visit, you call me. You move here, you don't call me. But Neal, you know, he was to himself. He was of himself. He was complicated. He had set a plan. He had set out to do what he wanted, and he didn't really want to draw a lot of attention to himself or impose on anyone. And so there he was, and we took full advantage. We weren't sure how long he might stay, if he would like it. He never did buy any cowboy boots, so we wanted to take advantage, and we wanted to include him in as many things as we could and get together. And slowly but surely over those years, really started to develop a relationship with Neal, really started to understand him and appreciate him. He was there in the good times and the tough times for the family. And you know, Neal is just a very sincere and considerate human being with a sharp intellect and a gentle soul. He pretty much is what you get when you have a professional librarian marry an Air Force pilot. You get a person who's somewhat reserved, incredibly patient, incredibly organized, but at the same time, a very self-confident risk taker who always had his eye towards the next exciting opportunity. The last time I saw Neal was 2 days before he moved over to North Carolina. We spent a good hour or so together. He made me a cup of his favorite tea. We talked about some non-important stuff to pass the time. We talked about some very important stuff. And I thought I would see him again, but as chance would have it, I would not. And I left there just so humbled by his stoic courage in the face of the incredible hardship that lay ahead and his deep concern for his loved ones, who he knew were suffering, and he wanted only to ease their pain. Neal Stevens, my first cousin, and now I can call my friend. Godspeed. Thank you. And let me introduce Rick Rocha to the microphone.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Rocha, Neal's stepson, but Neal was very much a father to me. And I'd like to thank Stacy and Hillary and Dick and Penny and the Reverend and everyone who put this together. This brings me back to such nostalgic times. You know, I was a small boy from Brazil, and I remember vividly showing up to Dick and Penny's house in Maine one magical Christmas, and I found it so odd that they knew my name, and they knew who I was. I never met these people before, and yet they knew all about me and accepted me into their homes, and it was like we'd all been family for years. I can officially say, as I told Neal many times, that I had the greatest childhood that anyone could ever ask for. I would tell Neal this often, every time we saw each other. My sister and I would play with Neal and Hillary's Legos, or his original Star Wars action figures every day. Penny would read my favorite book to me, Chocolate Mousse for Dinner, which I attribute much of my comedic sensibilities. And my sister and I would try to solve Dick's puzzles for hours and hours. And every morning I would climb down the stairs to find Dick doing the crossword puzzle. No matter how early I got up, he was always there. Always beat me to it. And I can still see Penny knitting in her room. To me, the Stevens family are the warmest, kindest, considerate, most humble, and well-mannered people that I know. And I can only hope that those manners rubbed off on me. Though I must admit, I haven't said, "May I be excused from the table," in a long time. But Neal and I had a very special relationship. He housed me, he raised me, he cultured me. I remember loving a book about the presidents at an early age, and not to get political, but I would ask Neal to read me about the election of John Quincy Adams over and over and over again. And he would, every time. Neal would take me to plays, to museum, to good movies, and one of my favorite stories is in Paris, I dropped my hat in Napoleon's tomb. And Neal lowered me down, this is a true story, lowered me down by my legs to retrieve the hat from Napoleon's tomb, and the guards rolled their eyes, you know. Neal loved learning and was very interested in sharing his curiosity with me. This really helped me bloom as an artist. You know, I found myself getting more interested in acting and theater, and Neal was not only supportive, but he took me to every acting class and waited for me reading his book. Neal was responsible. He took us to the doctors. He was the head of the PTA. He helped me with homework. And when it came time to apply to high school, Neal made sure I took all the acting classes I needed to get into LaGuardia High School, a very prestigious arts high school. And there was no greater feeling than when that big juicy envelope arrived that said I was accepted. We jumped in the air for joy. I remind you that my Tribeca childhood with the Stevens family was as perfect as it could be. It was a storybook. And it was a very different time. I often tear up about how beautiful and nostalgic it was. Neal was at every soccer game, graduation, every play. Not only that, Neal was cool. He was handsome. He wore aviators. He got better looking every year. I don't know if you noticed that. He would listen to 104.3, classic rock station. He loved Led Zeppelin. And Neal used Netflix before anyone knew about it, okay? I also would constantly remind him that he was related to Chester A. Arthur, the 21st president. Look, my parents separating was one of the hardest things that ever happened to me. What seemed like the most perfect family had come to an end. And I remember going into Neal's office one night and telling him, "I love you." And we hugged, we cried. Luckily, as time went by, I remained very close to Neal. He would come to my plays. We would talk on the phone. Years later, when I debuted my short film, both he and my mother attended, which meant a lot to me. Sorry. So sorry. Through the years, Neal kept supporting me. I'd call him about script ideas, legal advice. A famous actor that I met at a bar with many projects going on in show business. I would explain and re-explain some things. Of course, Neal being the responsible one, he would ask, "Have you made the LLC yet?" I'm like, "Yeah, almost, I'm trying." Finally, I did make the LLC. I was very proud. Neal and I got closer. I was lucky enough to meet Stacy, a fellow thespian who I adore, and she and I would review our favorite musicals. And Neal would listen closely, keep up the best he could. And you know, when you're an artist, there are times you just want to quit, plain quit. And I would often joke to Neal, I would say, you know what, after this project, I'm going to work at CVS. I'm never looking back. I'm done. Don't you agree, Neal? I mean, that's the responsible thing to do. And he would say, no, absolutely not. So even if I was kidding, that meant the world to me. When I debuted my play about two dentists in California, Neal flew out to see it. And even though there was only one ticket sold, he was still happy to come. He was so proud of me. Shortly after, he called me about the diagnosis. And like most of you, I was in utter shock. I couldn't believe it. All I could tell him was, Neal, you're a good man. I love you. Neal Stevens is fundamental to my life. I owe him everything. And I could say so much about him, his tenderness, how he laughed at all my jokes, how he never yelled, how he was loving. There's honestly too much to say, so I'll say it again. Neal, you're a good man. I love you. Thank you very much. And next up will be Matt Manning, his friend.
Thank you all for gathering today to honor and celebrate Neal. It's difficult to believe that we're here, trying to encapsulate the life of someone who brought so much joy and light into the world. Neal was my best friend. He was a part of me and a constant in my life. I know that many of you here feel that same way. Losing him feels like losing a piece of ourselves. Neal came into this world on Christmas Eve in Colorado, a gift wrapped in a Christmas stocking, with big sparkly blue eyes and a smile that became his lifelong signature. From the very beginning, he was full of resilience and physical strength, so much so that even as a baby, his dad would tell stories of Neal bridging up on his hands and feet while trying to change his diaper. That same energy, strength, and resilience followed Neal throughout his life, becoming his standard defining qualities. When Neal's family moved to Ordinary Way, we became fast friends, riding the bus together to school, sharing silly laughs, and putting on hand puppet shows over the seat backs. Those early adventures, whether biking to swim practice, through the Truro trails, or picking up lacrosse sticks together, laid the foundation for a lifelong bond. Neal was adventurous, strong, and always up for a challenge. Whether we were playing lacrosse, climbing school buildings, or even competing in pancake eating contests at the swim team's annual breakfast. Not a real contest, just me and Neal. Neal's joy for life was contagious. He lived every moment fully with a sparkle in his eye and a mischievous grin. One of the many stories that cemented our friendship happened late one night after our lacrosse team cleaned up the Patriot Center auditorium. Neal, who loved to drive fast, hit a curb so hard that one of the wheels on his beloved blue Volvo turbo sedan with the license plate Lax Rat, the wheel broke off. We were both safe, but stranded without cell phones in 1988. And while the rest of the team headed home, I stayed with Neal until a tow truck arrived hours later. That night, standing together in the parking lot, I knew our friendship was something rare and unbreakable. Even in those moments, Neal's strength and spirit shone through, reminding me that with him, every situation could turn into an adventure. Neal was more than just physically strong, a quality that earned him the nickname Steel Nevins in college. His resilience, intelligence, responsibility, and kindness made him the remarkable person we all knew. Yet he never lost that boyish joy for life, a joy that was evident even in his final days. Even as he faced his greatest challenge, Neal would share a smile and ask about me. He passed from this world surrounded by the love he deserved, leaving behind a legacy of strength, spirit, and that unmistakable sparkle in his eye. I can't believe he's gone, but I consider all of us incredibly fortunate to have shared so much life with him. Neal, you are my best friend, and life without you feels unimaginable. But I know that your joy, your spirit, and your resilience will continue to guide me, and until we meet again, rest in peace, my friend. Our next speaker is Gabe Benincasa.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. I wrote 3 versions. The crying version, the lots of crying version, and the extreme crying version. So I'm going to do the extreme crying version, very abridged version. Neal is kind and sincere. He came into my life during a difficult time of my life. I had not met him, and he was so incredibly kind. He took me into his home twice. I lived with him, and I have to say, I wish I still lived with him. It was some of the best time of my life. We got to know each other, and there were so many things one can learn from Neal. To this day, I still cannot figure out the volatility of options that he explained to me so many different times. I moved to D.C., and his parents were there, and Hillary were there, and he came to visit, and we spent so much time. We went to museums, we talked about politics and so many different things. But through everything, I always find he was just so damn sweet, so damn kind, so incredibly interesting. He just wanted to learn about everything. And it was just amazing. I moved to Austin in November, and we were spending, before I got there, I was looking for apartments, and he showed me all around, and it's just, I now walk around Austin, and I'm like, I went here with Neal, and I can't go there anymore. So, it was just, we were getting together almost every Friday, and he was sick for like 2 weeks, and I thought he had COVID. And I'm Italian, I kept saying, Neal, can I bring you food? Because I knew he wasn't eating well. And it was Friday, it was April 5th, and he called me and said, Gabe, I have pancreatic cancer. I cried all night. Next morning, I went to see him. And you know what he was doing? He was giving away the contents of his apartment. And we made a few trips. And then I thought I convinced him to stop. Because I said, Neal, you do need a table. And I actually think that he stopped because he saw how nervous I was. He wasn't the one that was nervous, it was me. I felt very fortunate, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And he's just so incredibly kind. And I got to tell him I love him, and I got to thank him. And so I was grateful. But I didn't know him that long, and he became such a great friend. And Rick, I met you once or twice. I will tell you that before we went to your play, he was so incredibly proud. And then Stacy, when he met you, Neal wasn't a person who jumped up and down for joy, but I knew he was joyous. So I love you too. I thank everyone. I have more written, but I can't do it.
We'll hear from Neal's friend, Scott.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by thanking Hillary, Stacy, the entire Stevens family for asking me to participate in today's service. My name is Scott Lisson. I met Neal in August of 1989, within days of moving into West Hall, 4th floor, as freshmen at Colgate. He lived a few doors down, and it was immediately clear that he was a charismatic character, constantly running up and down the hall with his hat on backwards, cross stick, and what would become his patented crooked smile and that twinkle in his eye. Neal and I became fast friends, along with a baker's dozen or so of other West Hall men and women. Our friend group was solidified within several months of our freshman year and flourished during our 4 years as undergraduates. Graduation did little to weaken our relationship, and Neal was a consistent presence in my post-college life. I moved to Boston for medical school, and Neal visited me routinely to hang out. He was just kind of interested in what I was learning. He attended my medical school graduation and hung out with my parents, who for years, I mean years, asked about that very handsome and intelligent young man with beautiful hair from Virginia. Neal was a groomsman in my wedding and endeared himself to my wife, Gail, who's a clinical psychologist, who would always comment on he was clearly the sweetest, kindest, most emotionally mature member of my Colgate friend group. Neal visited me during the tail end of my residency before I was deployed to the South Pacific for my Navy service. And incredibly, he flew to Guam, where we logged 4 dives together, and he babysat my now 19-year-old daughter, Paige, who was 10 months old at the time. It has been an honor to share my memories of Neal as a representative of our Colgate friend group. This is a group of men and women with very deep roots, intense relationships, and 35 years of committed love and friendship. I polled our friends for thoughts about Neal, what they remembered about him, what made him special, and why we all loved him so much. I'd like to share some of their comments. When I think of Neal, I am reminded of Maya Angelou's quote, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." Neal always had a welcoming smile and made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he was talking to you. His friendship was best described as unconditional, and I am so grateful for that. Neal was never afraid to march to the beat of his own drummer. He was always his authentic self. It was not until Neal and I found ourselves in New York City together as young attorneys that our friendship deepened. We spent many hours talking about the law, and he loved to exclaim, "There is no boot in a bee," emphasis on the word boot, as only a tax lawyer does. And Neal's curiosity and intelligence became manifestly clear. Neal's genuine interest in the goings-on in my life was and always will be particularly meaningful to me. Neal was one of the most genuine people I know, quietly interesting, respectful, and loyal to his friends, family, and himself. Neal was kind, thoughtful, and patient. He had a zest for life and lived his life the same way. His friendship made me want to be a better friend. I really got to appreciate Neal's caring when we connected after graduation. He would ask, "How are you doing?" And it wasn't just a phrase in passing. He really wanted to know. He had the time to listen and offer advice. I really appreciated our interactions. About 5 years ago, my phone rang on a Saturday morning, and it was Neal. I asked him why he was calling, and he said he just wanted to know what I was up to and how I was doing. It made me feel special that he had called and thought of me out of the blue on a Saturday morning. When I think of Neal, I think of someone who is not afraid to evolve. But despite his own transformation as a human being, he he remained committed to all the friends he made along the way. Neal always made me feel like I was the most important, most interesting person in the room. He was the perfect mix of salty and sweet with his sharp humor and big, warm heart. The things that struck me most about Neal were his constant efforts at self-growth and the fact that he was non-judgmental. He was constantly trying to better himself, but never made you feel like you should be trying to emulate him. Nobody helped me survive the early days at Colgate more than Neal. Nicest guy I'd ever met, consistently even-tempered, and my lacrosse soul brother. We supported each other from early freshman year right through graduation. Whenever I think of Neal, I remember his beautiful, welcoming smile. His laughter was infectious, and I always wanted to be around him. Even when we visited Neal and Stacy this past June in Raleigh when he was quite ill, he was still smiling, and that smile will forever remain in my heart. I'd like to conclude my remarks with a quote from the late, great Ernest Hemingway. "Every man's life ends the same way. It is only the details of how he lived and how he died that distinguish one man from another." Neal lived as a highly intelligent, multi-talented, uniquely principled, genuine human being. He was a loyal and dedicated friend, son, brother, and life partner. He made many, many people feel very special. He died brave, dignified, and surrounded by people who loved him. For reasons we will never understand, he was taken from us much too soon. Excuse me. We will miss him very much. Our final speaker is Neal's life partner, Stacey Harris.
Hi, I'm Stacey Harris, Neal's life partner, his girlfriend. We usually said girlfriend, boyfriend because we decided that sounded more fun, sounded more romantic. But whatever label you choose, he was my sweetheart, my special one. And the love of my life. I didn't have the privilege of knowing Neal for as long as most of you did. I didn't know the kid Neal who was silly and always made his sister Hillary laugh. I didn't know the clever teenage Neal, the lacrosse dynamo that his longtime friend Matt knew. Or the wilder college Neal that Scott and his Colgate friends knew. But I knew the remarkable, wise, kind, self-possessed, thoughtful, grown-up Neal. The spark was there from our very first date, and I just couldn't believe this person was real. The more he shared his interests and beliefs, the more surprised and amazed I was about how we were so aligned. I felt like I was on candid camera. And of course, that incredible smile and those gorgeous blue eyes sparkling just knocked me out. Then the more we got to know each other over the next few months, it became clear that Neal was indeed the man of my dreams. Like he was created just for me. He was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Loving, supportive, curious, compassionate, steady, so cute, and super smart. Sometimes I would just turn to him and say, "Are you real?" We loved our adventures together, whether they were big or small. He was my ideal travel partner, so organized, and he knew how much I loved his itineraries with all the details. We had such fun exploring new cities together. We enjoyed cultural activities like museums, readings, going to see live music or theater, but we also treasured the simple moments, like walking hand in hand in Central Park. He was always up for everything, anything, even if it was a little out of his comfort zone, like taking a two-step lesson at a honky-tonk with me in Austin, outdoor salsa dancing in New York City, and even appearing in some audition videos with me. His willingness and enthusiasm always made me happy. But what made Neal truly special was his kindness and his patience. He had a gentle way about him that made everyone feel valued and understood. Neal was always there, not just for me, but for anyone who needed him. He told me a story about when he was younger. He had worked for a moving company one summer, moving furniture. And he told me how when you're moving a sofa up a set of stairs, one person has to be at the bottom, doing most of the pushing and making it easier for the person at the top. He said that's what he wanted to be for me in life, the person at the bottom of the stairs, doing the heavy lifting. And that's what he was. Everyone loved Neal. His warmth and sincerity drew people to him effortlessly, and his capacity for empathy made him a true friend to so many. He was an excellent listener, and he was intentional about not interrupting or forcing advice onto you. If you did ask for his advice, he would say, "Well, if it were me..." Neal really was beautiful. Anyone could see that. And his quiet intelligence made him even more so. His intellect was matched only by his curiosity about the world around him. We spent a lot of time discussing nutritional studies in such details that anyone else either wouldn't have understood or would have just tuned out. We also loved talking about psychological theories, fitness, music, pop culture, and religion. Neal often said, "I don't believe in anything supernatural," but he believed in love and treating people with respect. He believed in self-improvement, being authentic, genuine, and dignified. That's who he was. He enjoyed sharing his philosophy. By the time I knew Neal, he had read a great deal about Stoicism, and if asked, he was happy to share his thoughts on Epictetus, who taught that we should accept things that are beyond our control and focus on the things we can influence. Neal would say, "The only thing we can control is our response." Neal was the ultimate example of the teachings of Epictetus on how to live a good life. Take life as it comes. Focus on what you can control. Treat people well, and choose your relationships carefully. And that was my Neal. The Neal I knew, admired, and loved. Even in facing his diagnosis and throughout his treatment, he remained unwaveringly calm, focusing on what he could control, and he did what needed to be done. I've always said Neal was my gift. Having him as my sweetheart brought me such joy, and I loved him fiercely. I think everyone knew I was absolutely crazy about him. Miss him so much, And I can't believe I don't get to be with him again. Losing him has left a huge void in my heart. But despite the pain of this loss, I am grateful. Grateful we found each other, for the time we had together, for the big love we shared, and for the memories that I cherish. Last Valentine's Day, in the last card Neal wrote to me, he wrote, "Thank you for being my special one and teaching me more about life and love every day." But I know that it was Neal who taught me so much about life and love. And I am a better person because of him. Thank you.
Let us take a quiet moment to reflect on the life of Neal as it has been shown to us through the stories of his loved ones. Neal was a person who was also deeply immersed in Eastern spiritual traditions. He understood the simplicity and value of allowing himself space to be and to connect to the quiet of the world. I invite you to take this time to engage in silent reflection and honor his perspectives in life. I invite you to consider what you want to do to continue Neal's legacy. We'll take just 1 minute of silence to consider how will we keep Neal's legacy, life, joy, and understanding of people going. Vietnamese monk and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh stated, "If a wave only sees its form with its beginning and end, it will be afraid of birth and death. But if the wave sees that it is water, identifies itself with the water, then it will be emancipated from birth and death. Each wave is born and is going to die, but the water is free from birth and death." Neal was the water, the energy source that has ceased to exist in body form but remains with us in energy form. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Neal has returned to the energy that surrounds us all. A well-known Unitarian minister in Washington, D.C., A. Powell Davies, preached that we should accept it simply as a part of life, sorrow. Let the heart be open to pain. Let it be stretched by it all. All the evidence says that it is better that way. An open heart never grows bitter, or if it does, it cannot remain so. In this desolate hour, there is an outcry, a clenching of hands open to emptiness, a burning pain of bereavement, a weary ache of loss. But anguish, like ecstasy, is not forever. There comes a gentleness, a returning quietness, a restoring stillness. This, too, is a door to life. Here also is a deepening of meaning, and it can lead to dedication, a going forward to the triumph of the soul, the conquering of the wilderness. In the process, we will become a more deepened and inward knowing people. And in the final reckoning, all is well. So rest in peace, Neal Stevens. Your spirit, your love, and your grace will live on in all of us.
This song, Morning Has Broken, I neglected to put in the program. Probably the most significant part about it, and the reason we know it, is that the music is by Yusuf Islam, formerly known as Cat Stevens. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the world. The rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the springing fresh from the world. Please feel free to join us for a quick reception.